Picture this. You're just 17 years old in the early 19th century, and you're suffering from absolutely agonizing gallstones. Now imagine undergoing surgery to remove them, but, and here's the catch, without a single drop of anesthesia. It's a pretty harrowing thought, right? But that was the incredibly harsh reality for a young, frail kid named James K. Polk. Surviving that brutal ordeal seemed to forge this just relentless, unstoppable force of will within him. In this explainer, we're going to look at exactly how this once sickly child grew into a political powerhouse who entirely reshaped the map of the United States in just 4 short years.
So here is our agenda for today. We're going to follow an incredible and honestly quite dramatic narrative arc. We'll start with his surprise nomination as the dark horse candidate, review his 4 bold promises, and see how his hyper-focused ambition secured the Pacific Northwest and pushed the country through the Mexican-American War. Finally, we'll examine the ultimate personal price he paid for all of this and how his unprecedented success ultimately left a nation divided.
All right, Part 1, the dark horse candidate, from young Hickory to the presidency.
Okay, let's dive right into this. A dark horse? That is exactly what James K. Polk was. Going into the 1844 Democratic Convention, the heavyweights in the room were former President Martin Van Buren and Senator Lewis Cass. But their factions were completely deadlocked. The party was totally split over the annexation of Texas, and they desperately needed a compromise choice to unite them. While Polk strongly supported annexing Texas immediately, which really appealed to the party's expansionist wing. And so, on the 9th ballot, this highly disciplined Jacksonian from Tennessee, who they called Young Hickory, literally shocked the nation. He became the first dark horse presidential nominee in major party history.
That total surprise of a nomination kicked off a fierce general election. Polk found himself facing off against the legendary Whig leader Henry Clay. But Polk, supported by his incredibly politically astute wife Sarah, ran a very disciplined, grassroots campaign. It was all centered around this bold, expansionist vision for the country's future. And it worked. He secured a decisive 170 electoral votes to Clay's 105. But if you look closely, this victory revealed some deep regional divisions. Polk heavily carried the South and the West, while Clay took much of the Northeast.
Moving to Part 2, 4 bold promises, the one-term checklist.
When Polk entered office, he did something that's almost unheard of in modern politics. He brought a very clear, incredibly focused to-do list, and he publicly promised to serve only one single term. He basically said, "I'm here for results, not politics." He had 4 major goals. First up, reduce tariffs to promote trade, which he knocked out with the Walker tariff. Second, reestablish the independent treasury to stabilize federal finances. You see, he methodically checked off these huge domestic goals first, building this stable economic foundation so he could aggressively go after his foreign policy goals, items 3 and 4 on his list.
So the crucial point here is understanding why he wanted all this land. It was driven by a very specific, very powerful ideological engine, manifest destiny. This was the 19th century belief that the United States was literally divinely ordained to expand its borders from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific Ocean. For Polk, this wasn't just some abstract political rhetoric. It provided the direct justification and the unifying national narrative for his extremely aggressive pursuit of land.
Part 3. Securing the Pacific Northwest. Diplomacy and brinkmanship.
So Polk's first territorial target was the Pacific Northwest, the massive Oregon Territory, which had been jointly occupied by the U.S. and Britain since 1818. He campaigned on this famous, incredibly aggressive slogan, 54-40 or fight. His expansionist supporters were loudly demanding that the United States take control of the entire Oregon Territory, all the way up to the 54-degree 40-minute latitude line. This was serious brinksmanship. He was taking a huge gamble that sincerely risked triggering a full-blown war with the British Empire.
But here's where it gets interesting. While his rhetoric was fiery, his actual actions were deeply rooted in strategic pragmatism. Polk was smart. He knew the U.S. couldn't afford a two-front war. So rather than fighting, he actually negotiated the 1846 Oregon Treaty with Britain, settling on a peaceful compromise boundary right at the 49th parallel. He managed to secure the Pacific Northwest for the United States without shedding a single drop of blood.
Part 4. The Mexican-American War, the price of the Southwest.
Let's see how this builds, because checking off the final massive items on his list for California and New Mexico would require a totally different and highly controversial approach. Tensions were already running incredibly high because the U.S. had just annexed Texas in 1845. Now, in late 1845, Polk actually tried diplomacy first. He sent an envoy to offer Mexico $25 million for the territory. Mexico completely rejected it. So, frustrated, Polk orders U.S. troops down into a highly disputed border region near the Rio Grande. Naturally, by April of 1846, Mexican forces clashed with those troops, and by May, Congress officially declared war.
Polk used this exact, powerful phrase, "American blood has been shed on American soil," to rally Congress and the American public behind the war effort. But, this was intensely debated at the time. Critics, including a young, outspoken congressman from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln, strongly opposed the war. They openly accused Polk of deliberately provoking the entire conflict just to grab land and expand American territory under false pretenses. The result of that swift military campaign? A staggering 500,000 square miles gained by the United States through the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. With this single treaty, Polk actually pulled it off. He achieved his ultimate goal of transforming the United States into a massive continental superpower stretching from ocean to ocean. To really grasp the true scale of what we call the Mexican Cession, just picture a modern map in your head. This single land grab created modern-day California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. When you look at the American Southwest today, you are looking directly at the handiwork of James K. Polk's single four-year administration. It is an absolutely massive, literal transformation of the country.
To officially seal the deal, the United States paid Mexico $15 million for this vast new territory, formally ending the brutal military campaigns led by American generals like Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott. The map of North America was completely redrawn, but as we'll see, the cost of that new map was profound.
Which brings us to Part 5, the ultimate personal price, a president consumed by duty.
Remember that promise? Well, unlike almost every other politician in history, Polk actually kept his word. He served exactly one term. But to check off every single item on that incredibly ambitious agenda in just 4 years, the man worked obsessively, day and night. He micromanaged his cabinet to the point of complete exhaustion, basically running the entire executive branch and the war effort single-handedly. The sheer emotional and physical strain of it all totally drained his already frail body. His health just plummeted incredibly fast. He leaves office on March 4, 1849, and then, for some reason, immediately embarks on an exhausting farewell tour through the South. By the time he finally reaches his home in Tennessee, he is gravely ill. On June 15, 1849, literally just 3 short months after leaving the White House, he dies of cholera at the age of 53. His life was completely spent, fully consumed by the tremendous demands of his own ambition.
Finally, Part 6, A Nation Divided, the Seeds of the Civil War.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real tragedy of the era. While Polk expanded the nation outwardly, his actions completely fractured it inwardly. These massive new Western territories immediately reopened a terrifying and deeply divisive question: would the institution of slavery expand westward? The Northern perspective fiercely opposed this spread, fearing the expansion of Southern political power, and they pushed hard for bans like the Wilmot Proviso. On the other side, the Southern perspective demanded that slavery be permitted in the West to preserve their economic interests, and these strongly opposed any legislative bans. These two viewpoints were on a total collision course.
All that map drawing caused a direct, catastrophic chain reaction. The Mexican Cession triggered the explosive Wilmot Proviso debate and necessitated the incredibly fragile Compromise of 1850. It led to the total collapse of the Whig Party, paved the way for the rise of the anti-slavery Republican Party, and ultimately culminated in the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. Polk doubled the physical size of the nation, sure, but he completely failed to resolve the explosive moral and political questions that came packed inside that new soil.
So we are left with the ultimate paradox of Polk. Through a hyper-focused, one-term agenda, he proved to be one of the most effective presidents in all of American history. He actually checked off every major box he set out to achieve. Yet that very same success directly set the stage for a catastrophic national rupture. The true cost of his achievements was paid not just with his own early death, but soon after in the blood of the impending Civil War. Which brings us to a final, really profound thought for you today. When you look at the map of the United States today, ask yourself this: did James K. Polk's relentless ambition build a continental superpower, or did it light the fuse that very nearly destroyed it? It's a fascinating question about the true cost of ambition, and one that I hope invites you to look much closer at this complex era in our history. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning history.